Shalom, kia ora koutou, and good evening. Can I acknowledge you, Deborah, and your leadership, and for bringing us here today. Thank you again to the Holocaust Centre of New Zealand for inviting me to host this important annual event held here in the Beehive. It is my honour to host you. I acknowledge you for organising this evening and for all of the work that the Holocaust Centre does, leading Holocaust education and remembrance in New Zealand. Thank you. As the words behind me say, to witness, to remember, to educate, and for all of us to act. I also acknowledge the New Zealand National Commission for UNESCO, the Ministry for Ethnic Communities, David Zwartz and Wellington City Council for your role in this event. And I acknowledge all of the colleagues of mine from across our Parliament, the local body councillors and the diplomatic corps, also the Jewish and interfaith communities, our cherished Holocaust survivors, refugees and descendants. You honour us with your presence. Here tonight soon too will be Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, together with the US Embassy Deputy Chief of Mission David Gerenbeck and Human Rights Commissioner Dr. Stephen Rainbow. And thank you all for joining us tonight to remember the Holocaust. 80 years we remember, that is today's theme. This year also marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, including the liberation of concentration camps, Auschwitz, the most infamous of all those camps, being liberated on January 27, 1945. Today we remember the lives lost and affected by the Holocaust 80 years on. And we must speak of it, because to speak of it is to bear witness and remember, to not deny it. We must not allow it to be denied, nor allow others to deny it, because to deny it is to allow the mistakes of history to be repeated. Let us never forget. 6 million Jews, more than the present-day population of New Zealand, were murdered in some of the most horrific and inhuman circumstances imaginable. The Nazis' hatred and violence knew no shame. They murdered and terrorised children, elderly people, entire families, people who could not run away, people who had nowhere to go, people who could not defend themselves. They ripped people from their homes, separated families, worked people to death, starved them, experimented on them, tortured them, killed them on an industrial scale. And as painful as it is to remember how unspeakable these acts are, we must speak of them. It was a deliberate attempt to exterminate Jewish people and also targeted Roma and Sinti people, disabled people, political opponents, Jehovah's Witnesses, and people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Together, those groups were murdered in the millions. A saying of which the exact origin is unclear is that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And one of the many chilling aspects of the Holocaust was the bureaucratic banality of it from the side of the oppressors. It was systematic, organised, and normalised. It was sanitised and euphemised. And it was not the work of one person, but in fact of millions of supposedly ordinary people, carrying out collectively some of the most ghastly acts of inhumanity in living memory. It is the complicity of those people that enabled the Holocaust to happen. All those lives lost, all of them endless in potential, all in the name of vile hatred, racism, and prejudice. The Holocaust's impact, of course, had tendrils beyond those lives lost. It affected those left behind. It changed Europe and the wider world forever. Today is a day we remember, but we must remember the lessons of history not just today, but all days. We must ensure 80 years from now that people still remember, that our children know these stories, that people across our community understand this grave reality. Because if we remember and heed the lessons of history, we remain vigilant to the threat that hateful ideologies have on democracy and our humanity. We must continue to defend democracy and denounce racism, hatred, and terrorism of all kinds, whenever and wherever it arises. We must speak up against anti-Semitism and discrimination. And it is to the shame of New Zealand that we have seen increasing amounts of anti-Semitism in our community, and together we must denounce that wherever it appears. And we must continue to listen, learn, and educate on the horrors of the Holocaust. We must promote human rights, and to do so proactively, fights to prevent further atrocities. And with that in mind, I thank the Holocaust Centre of New Zealand for the vital work they do in this area. We know the fight is not over. The events of October 7 and that have occurred subsequent to that make today's remembering even more painful, and I want to acknowledge the pain in this room today. As we watch some of the hostages being returned to their families following the most horrific ordeal, we are reminded once again of the fight and the work we must do for peace. A data release, even from the New Zealand Police, showed almost 3/4 of hate crime offences reported nationwide since 2020 were motivated by race or ethnicity. That was followed by religion, sexual orientation, and gender identity. In late 2023, the Post reported a rise in threats and abuse aimed at Jewish people in New Zealand, with some from the Jewish community saying it had reached a point where they had had to increase security at their home and work. And I know that has been the case at temples here in Wellington, and I know from first-hand testimony that even students in our schools have felt moved to speak out. That is not acceptable. We must continue to remember the lessons of the Holocaust and fight hatred wherever it dares to rear its ugly head. And we call once again for peace wherever there is war and armed conflict. I hope you will join me in my commitment to that, and I thank you very much for the honour of joining you all today. Thank you.